Welcome back to Level Up, the Career Playbook, aka How to Be Better at Your Job. I am your host, Brian Bell, 15-year HR vet and co-founder of MambaHR.com, and a big believer that with the right playbook, anyone can win at work. All right, remember this podcast started because I got laid off, and after years of working in HR, I realized there's a lot of unspoken rules, unwritten moves, and career cheat codes that the best people know, but most folks probably never get to learn unless they have a great mentor. So I decided to build that playbook by talking to people who are doing it right. And speaking of doing it right, today's guest is the blueprint for mastering your voice, building community, and showing up with power. I'm talking about the creator of the Tequila Tales, a brand strategy master, a speaker, and all-around communicator extraordinaire, Isaac Paul Austin III. We're going to get into how you can build your personal brand without sounding fake. How do you navigate through tough convos at work, especially in this wild and crazy political climate? How do you show up with confidence, whether you're on stage or in a Slack thread? All right, let's dive in from the very beginning. Isaac, how are you? How have you been, man?
Man, I'm doing really, really good. First and foremost, I really appreciate the opportunity to hop on with you and just have a really good spirited conversation. All the things that I've always known about you, every interaction that we've always had has always been so substantive and so valuable. And so, having this opportunity for us to kind of share this space with one another, I think is incredible. And the fact that we're in this day and age where we're creating our own platforms. And so, this to me is incredibly exciting. And like I said, I'm looking forward to this discussion.
And I appreciate that. And to the people listening, we have a mutual connection. Isaac, your wife, is a friend of mine from way back in the Omaha, Nebraska days. And she reached out a few weeks ago saying, why aren't y'all on each other's platforms? And I'm like, that is a really good question. So first of all, I'm honored and thankful that you were on here because from what I know and from what I've seen for a while, you've had your own platform for quite a few years with Tequila Tales, and you've been doing your thing for a while. So I feel like I am the student and you're the teacher. So I'm extremely thankful and honored that you're on here. And the people listening, we're going to learn a lot today. So thank you. And thank you to Kate.
Absolutely.
All right. This is the Level Up podcast sponsored by Mamba HR. So it's a sports related podcast, the sports related name of a company, even though it's an HR company that I'm trying to start. And Mamba starts from Kobe Bryant. That's my favorite of everything. And so being Mamba HR and having a sports related themed podcast, we're going to have sports related themes of segments. First one being the pregame. So, starting in the pregame and talking about foundations and formation, let's start from the very beginning. Who the hell is Isaac Paul Austin? Tell me, why do you think I invited you on to this podcast, and what are people going to learn today?
Okay, so check this out, Brian. We did a quick run through right before we hopped on, and while you did not give me everything, you did let me know this is going to be the first question. And so here's what's crazy about this being the first question. I absolutely hate answering this question. Okay. Always have. Being a person that literally works in communication, and it is my job to communicate with people, I've always just detested this question. I hate bios, and largely because I'm someone that feels that the value that I add is in the present, right? It's in the now. It's in what we're doing at this current moment. And I've never really been a big fan of living on my past laurels. Anytime that I'm invited to speak and I watch the speakers that'll go up and like literally the first sometimes 20%, sometimes 40 to 50% is them giving you a rundown of all the stuff that they've done in the past. And then they give you this watered down message. With me, I normally just jump right in and I go right for the jugular, because my thing is who gives a damn about what it is that I've done in the past, right? It's like, am I going to say something right now that's going to influence or affect you? And so because of that, and also just because of the fact that even with all the things I've done, I feel like I'm still just scratching the surface. Like I'm not even really in my bio just yet, right? I'm not even into the meat of it. And so I always feel like, oh, I hate answering this. So what I did, as soon as you said that, I said, you know what? Let me do something unique and let me go to ChatGPT. And because I've been having this relationship with ChatGPT for, a couple of years now, and it's been pretty intuitive, I said, let me ask ChatGPT, who is Isaac Paul, right? Just because I said, let me see.
I love that. My life goes through my work life and my home life, and my business life was all through ChatGPT. So it's a she for me. She knows me better than anybody. So that's good. I love it.
Right. So here we go. This is what ChatGPT said about who Isaac Paul is. Isaac Paul is a communicator, a connector, and a creative entrepreneur. I'm reading it in first person because I'm someone who believes deeply in the power of authentic conversation, whether that's through hosting live events like the Tequila Tales, facilitating meaningful discussions on relationships and culture, or helping businesses build better brands, relationships with their employees and customers. At my core, I'm driven by curiosity and a passion for storytelling, always exploring ways to bring people together, spark thoughtful dialogue, and help individuals and communities better understand each other. And on that note, I'm gonna say, good job, Chat GPT. That is one of the reasons why I like this thing, because it's like you dump it all in there. You're like, you know what, man, help me be a little bit more concise, because you let me get to running with it, man. And I don't know which version of Isaac Paul
That's
is
fair.
going to show up today, right? So I just told you all of that. What you might get may have nothing to do with what ChatGPT felt was going to be the best introduction of who Isaac Paul is. But I do think that that is pretty solid, right? Like, I am at my core someone that believes in the power of communication, right? And that's in a lot of different ways. I'm actually an artist, right? I'm more of an artist than anything else. That's what started my entire journey. Is I am a creative entrepreneur. And so I think because it all begins with the art, it started with music, then it moved into production, and then it moved into video production. And then it kind of moved into this space where I went from being the person that created the landscape to being the person that was in front of the camera, right? And actively engaging people. And so in all areas of my life or my business, I think that it stems from my creativity and my willingness sometimes to kind of think outside the box and to try to see the big picture more so than just all the finer details. And so I'm gonna say at my core, probably really who Isaac Paul is an artist.
Okay, you're an artist and you are a communicator, and ChatGPT said you're a communicator extraordinaire, because I actually ran your LinkedIn through ChatGPT to get a bio of who you were, and it gave a very close, similar uh, backdrop too. So I love that. Staying at the beginning here, though, let's start with the obvious. For the way that I feel, a lot of people know you, and you have a really big following, and the way that I know you outside of um, Casey, is the Tequila Tales. And this has been going on for quite a while now. It's been 10 plus years, I believe.
Yeah,
Doing it
12.
for a while.
We just had our 12
Tell
year
me
anniversary.
about Tequila Tales. What is it? How did this become a thing? How's it going?
So it's going really good, and it's actually currently in a state of evolution right now as we speak. Now, it's a thing that found me, right? It started with me doing a favor to a close friend of mine who owned an art lounge in Chicago. And she was releasing her own line of wines, and she didn't have the kind of license where she could sell it outside. She had to bring people inside of her gallery. And so her and her partner was like, you know what? We need to host something that will bring people here and get people kind of engaging. And so they decided to have a relationship chat. Now, this is back in like 2010. So this is before like social media is out, but it's before we really know about viral trends and influencer culture and all of that type of stuff, right? This is just us posting our food and connecting with our friends that we knew from college.
Is
So
this
she
still
was thinking,
MySpace days when we're top 8 and top 4 in it? You know? So,
okay, MySpace was kind of on its way out, so Facebook was starting to take
okay. All
over,
right.
but
Okay.
we were still very much
That's how I
professional.
remember the eras now. What platform? Black Planet, MySpace, did Facebook. My
Don't
bad.
don't
All
don't
right.
go
Keep going.
Black Planet now. Though. That's see now that's a whole nother story. Okay, like that's another conversation. But so she they decide to have this relationship chat, and they said, you know what? Why don't we have that guy that always comes in, that's always fun, and see if he would mind hosting? I just love being in that space because it was always a lot of intelligent, attractive business women in this space. And I was a single man, so I was like, I'm rocking with y'all. So when they asked me to host it, I didn't think twice. I never looked back. Very first one that we had, it didn't have a lot of structure. They paired me with a Yale educated co-host who I had never met prior to that particular day. And she was just supposed to be like a stand-in. They wanted to rotate host out. And I remember that day, it was maybe about 20 people in the room, no microphones, just me, a clipboard, some questions. I kid you not, Brian, when we had that show, it went maybe about 2 hours. The only way I can explain it is God was in the room. Like, I noticed that I was doing something, that I had tapped into a space that I had never tapped into before. And even through all of this artistic stuff I was doing, because I mean, I literally was knee deep in music at this point, I realized I've never been more alive and more in the present than in that moment. And I could feel it, and so could the room feel it. And so you could just tell that something in the world shifted in that moment. I remember it was a woman that just happened to be in town from Los Angeles, and she was doing something in entertainment, and she pretty much asked me, she was like, Isaac, have you ever thought about bringing this out to LA? Because LA can really use this. And I remember when she said that, I mean, it blew my mind. And I told her, I said, you know what? I said, I honestly, I hadn't thought about it. This is the first one we had. I was like, and I kind of think Chicago needs it too, because I didn't even know what it was. I just knew from even her reaction and the reactions from everyone, we got something here. And so we did it monthly at that particular location until the unfortunate closing of that gallery. And in 2013, I had a moment New Year's Day when my spirit was like, you know what, you're chasing all of these other artistic aspirations, but you remember that thing that you did back in 2010, 2011? Like that's your genius area. And I kid you not, Brian, when I say I literally stopped everything else I was doing and turned on a dime that day. And then that's when I relaunched the brand, which got changed to Tequila Tales, and I haven't turned back since.
So it's virtual, but I want to, for the people that don't know what we're talking about. So Tequila Tales, I know you said that you try to help out a friend from the very beginning, but this seems like it's morphed into, and I've been following you for a while online,
Mhm.
a large group of people. You come together and you as the host, you're talking about relationships. What are you talking about? Like, why are people drawn to what you're doing? There's some magic there, but I want to make sure people understand what that magic is that you're creating when you have these shows.
And that's a good question. One of the things that I try to do to ensure that it just never becomes stale, right? Because there's only so many topics under the sun. Only so many ways that we can discuss the same kind of questions. And you never want to get to a space where it's like who should pay for the first date, or the 50-50 conversation. I mean, there's so
We've
many.
had enough of that.
We've had enough of that, and it can still sometimes filter its way into conversations. But one of the things that I've always attempted to do was, once again, being a creative, being an artist, it's like, how can we take something that's common and like update it? And so what I always try to do with my topics is I'll make it very analogous, in a sense of something that's happening in this world today. I'll use that as the main topic, and then we'll just use that as a metaphor to love and relationships. So, one of the examples that I guess I can give is one of our most recent, when we were celebrating our 12-year anniversary just recently. And so, with it being our 12-year anniversary, we said, you know what, let's go ahead and discuss the dozens, right? Being 12 years, I'll make the topic about the dozens. And so this particular, just to read you what a topic for Tequila Tales would sound like. Now, we all know what the dozens is. So
Do we
with it
all
being,
explain it? Because I don't know, like, I'm just
all
saying,
right. So you are right, because everybody might not know what the dozens is. Okay.
I got a little
So
different audience, bro. I got a little different audience. I'm
you're
just saying.
right. You're right. You're right. Shame on me, right? Let me go ahead and just and reel this back in. So I'll read what the topic description is, just so you can see how I've always created these. In the Black community, playing the dozens wasn't just about witty comebacks. It was our proving ground. It taught us the power of quick thinking, the art of emotional perception, and how to measure precisely the difference between humor that bonds us and words that wound. This month, the Tequila Tales celebrates 12 unforgettable years by diving deep into how this tradition of clever observation and razor sharp wit, timing, influences our relationships today. We'll unpack what it means to know when to speak your truth, when to listen deeper, and how to communicate without losing the connection. Whether you're navigating love, friendship, or family, mastering the art of playful engagement and emotional awareness can make the difference between a relationship that thrives and one that falters. Because sometimes the deepest truths come wrapped in laughter, and our best insights surface when we keep it real with wit, warmth, and wisdom. So that will be how I will structure the conversation. And then I'll have various topics, and it's always on theme. And in many cases, we'll have a healthy following of people that'll return, but at least half to 60% of the room is always, this is their first time experiencing it. So no one is required to talk. I'm not shoving a microphone in front of your face. Like sometimes people just want to come and kick back and enjoy a very good, authentic conversation, and that's fine. But it's my job to get people to want to grab this microphone. So I'm walking around with the microphone. My co-host, which here in Phoenix is my wife, she's walking around with the microphone, and I'm throwing questions out.
Okay. Now, when you gave the synopsis that you were reading off about your last episode, I think there was a good tie-in into kind of what the theme of this podcast is. Having those weird conversations, I think you said through humor, and kind of having a lighthearted way to have some kind of uncomfortable conversations. I think that really ties into people at work and especially at corporate America. Like when you have to have these tough conversations with your boss, or if you're a boss, you have to have these tough conversations with the people that report to you, or just in general, in order to be seen fully at work, the way that you communicate matters. The way
Yes.
that you show up matters, not just for difficult conversations, but for you to actually be seen. You do have to make sure that you're managing how you show up and how you're being seen. So I think that's really cool. And that's why I want to make sure I'm showing that connection between
Mhm.
what you're doing and how it can make or break a relationship. And what I'm trying to talk about is a similar thing where it can make or break a career if you're not communicating the right way, or being lighthearted enough to make fun of yourself in some certain situations. Or if a manager gives you some direct feedback, you have to be able to kind of take the desert. You got to take that ribbing a little bit in order to get better. And so I think there was a really good tie-in. So I appreciate that. Let me move to the next question, which is digging deeper into what you mentioned. Okay, so you have built a brand around making sure that people are being vulnerable, making sure that you and others are being authentic, bringing people from all over the planet, all over the country, all over the cities that you're at, connecting people. Being vulnerable, being authentic, and genuine connection, that's normally what we do not do at work.
Right.
So if we're going to tie the two things, one, why do you think those things that are kind of uncomfortable for most people, why do you think that's been your superpower? Maybe what I would love to know is if you can explain to people why it would behoove them to maybe not make it their superpower, but to actually think about how they could be better at being vulnerable, being authentic, and establishing real connections at the office too.
So great questions. First off, I read a book when I was 16 that changed my life. And it's such a basic book, right? But it's still a classic. And I might even reread it again. How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it was such a fascinating book because when I first looked at it, I pushed back because it felt like it was attempting to get me to learn how to be manipulative or how to become a yes man or something to that degree. But really what it was teaching you about was just human psychology, right? And ultimately empathy. How to ultimately learn what it is that the other person desires so that you can communicate through that lens, right? I have two pet peeves. One is to be misunderstood, and the other one is to be taken for granted. And so, in my desire to not be misunderstood, that doesn't just mean that I talk a whole lot. It means that I'm trying to figure out the most effective way to utilize my language so that I can convey my thought. People that know how to think critically and convey their thought, that is literally one of the most powerful superpowers that anyone can have. Here's the deal. You don't even have to agree with me, but if I can get you to understand what it is that I'm attempting to convey, one, the majority of our conflicts would diminish, right? Because a lot of times we're arguing, and it's because one person is saying one thing and the other person is receiving something that is different than what is actually being communicated, right? Because one of the things that we learn about communication is about how only 7% of it is actually what it is that you say, right? But what it is that I receive may be something that's very different. And then that breakdown in communication is where the majority of our conflicts lie. And so learning how to effectively communicate puts you in that position to where even if we disagree, we at least understand one another, right? And so that's kind of, I think, where I started from. And if you are going to be able to effectively communicate, it means that you have to learn how to be empathetic. You have to learn really the law of karma, which is you cannot receive anything that you are not willing to give first. And so the best communicators are those that are transparent, right? If really what you want is truth, are you being truthful with the person that you are speaking to, right? Because whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Like it's biblical, but it is universal truth that we understand that the seeds that you sow at some point will generate a harvest, right? And so to me, effective communication comes from that willingness to be vulnerable, that willingness to share your authentic truth. Because what ends up happening is you give people permission to share their truth. Right now, we're in a day and age nowadays that people think that sharing your truth is being mean spirited. They think it means being an asshole, and no, that's something different. Right? Sharing your truth is also acknowledging and respecting the other person who you are giving this message to. Because, see, my job is not to trigger you. My job is not to get you to be outraged, right? Because if my goal is to successfully achieve whatever this objective is, then that means that I got to communicate this message in a way that you are actually receiving it, right? You have the ability to be able to connect with your recipient in a much more profound manner. And that's something that I learned early on. And I've carried it not just through Tequila Tales, but any kind of consulting project that I've done or any kind of marketing project that I've done. That message has to be able to resonate, and it
Let's
has to
talk
come from
about
a
that.
real space.
Let's talk about that. You've worked with Google, you worked with BMW, you worked in corporate America and worked with larger customers and companies. What do you think something that these larger corporations, just corporate America in general, gets wrong about how we communicate and how we brand? Because you're talking about being authentic and people can see through that, which I think you caught yourself and realized, well, not everybody can see through it, or people don't care if they're getting their chain yanked anymore, right? But okay, you work for these big companies. What are we getting wrong? What is corporate America getting wrong when it comes to communicating and branding?
Oh, listen, man, that is a loaded question, but I'm gonna simplify it. I'm gonna simplify this one because to me it's wild, right? Corporations have gone above and beyond to, from a tax perspective, be identified as a person, right? No, it's not a corporation. The corporations are
Corporations are
seen as
people, my friend.
individuals, right? Then why don't they communicate with us like individuals? Why do you still communicate with us like a brand and not like a person? I kid you not. This is one of the most fascinating things in marketing that I feel maybe 95% of million-dollar organizations get completely wrong. I am so amazed at how many times that they screw the pooch on this. The first mistake that they made was in undervaluing the power of social media, right? And in terms of what the medium, the potential of the medium. It took them so long to recognize what was unfolding right before their very eyes. But now that they've decided to hop on board, they're screwing the pooch with that, because now all they're doing is dumping a bunch of money into social media by pushing commercials in front of our faces. And it's like, okay, I thought corporations were people. Then why are you speaking to me as a business and instead of speaking to me as an actual person, right? Like, you're marketing to me in a way that is very different than how this medium naturally moves, right? And when you think about a few brands that have tapped into it and they do it very well, I'll give you one, for example, that's fascinating. Wendy's. Wendy's social media handle,
Love Wendy's social media. I love it.
crazy, right? Crazy. You forget that this is a multi-billion dollar organization
It
that
feels
sells
like
burgers.
my friend sitting on the couch is like, okay,
Snapping back, right? Snapping back. Now, they're not even paying for that. They're just trending naturally. So when you think about, like, literally the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've saved in paying to get their messaging in front of us just because they knew how to communicate like a person, you know what I'm saying? And now all of a sudden we find ourselves following this business as if they're a person, right? Like, social media is people driven. And so, you think about a show that you might fall in love with on TV. You can love Game of Thrones, right? Or me, like Atlanta. I love Atlanta, but I'm not going to follow Atlanta on FX on
right.
social media. I'm going to follow Donald Glover. I'm going to follow one of the characters that I fall in love with. I'm not going to follow the business that pushed that. So it's like, that's where they keep missing it, is that the humans on social media is what takes off, not the businesses. So if you want your business to take off, that's why they've had to, go after influencers, because influencers can make a personal connection. But even when you see the influencers, the moment that an influencer starts to push a business, then all of a sudden their numbers start to drop. So it's like,
That's
it's
a
it's this
really good
delicate
call.
dance. Yeah, where the business has to learn how to develop a voice that feels authentic and that's communicating to you like your cousin, like your auntie
Hey,
or
let me ask you a
whoever.
question. Let me ask a question about that because that's a really good point. Why do you feel companies, business, even startups, I'm a business, so now I must talk stuffy and
Right.
I must, hello, I'm, like, what I, but it never works. Like the individuals at the company are like, that is corny. But for some reason, as soon as we get to work, we feel we have to tighten up. Why is that? Why does that happen? Because to your point, we don't follow Dove brand soap, right? If there was like Dovania of Dove brand soap who was dropping jokes, we might follow. And there's this dude named Tony from LC Sign. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but it's this random guy in China and they make just signs from all kinds of just whatever business sign you need, right? I
Mhm.
have been following this guy named Tony from LC Sign for about 3 months. And they're not even ads, but they're technically ads, but all of his posts are the most funny, crazy things where he makes fun of Donald Trump and makes fun of America, makes fun of all kind of stuff. He takes current events and then turns it into a post. And he's getting millions upon millions and millions of views. I show speeds in China and met with this guy. Like this guy is blown up by just doing commercials on making signage.
Mhm.
And I follow him and he's got a cult following, but he's genuine, right? And everybody loves him and follows him. And when I look at these larger companies, it's like you said, this larger brand where it's just here's the company name, and today we did this thing, and we're launching 3 new products of which we're proud
Right.
about. It's like 7 lakes, right?
Right.
Versus why aren't we doing, to your point, this individualized talk to me as a person? And I mean, what you just said is worth millions of dollars, which I'm not saying you invented that, but maybe talk to people that are listening that are in charge of their marketing brands right now. And why aren't we doing this right?
I think it's and that's a good question. I honestly think that sometimes it does come down to, and I try to be sensitive to the fact that we are all inherently built different and we all have our strengths and our weaknesses, right? And so if you are a brand that sells something that's unsexy, or if you are a brand where people that are efficient in that particular area may have to have a certain type of personality that may make them a little socially awkward because you're deep in the engineering or deep in the tech, and maybe you weren't out building the other skill sets that could make us kind of whole as humans. Then that's when you outsource, right? And
Cool.
so I
I
think that
understand
that
that.
right.
But why are we outsourcing to people that
And that's the thing, is that I think that honestly, I think they just haven't gotten it yet. I think that sometimes because there are other areas in society where we can kind of point to where you say to yourself, why hasn't this clicked for you guys yet? I think some people and even some businesses, the thing that can make you strong is also the thing that can be, your Achilles heel, right? What makes you strong can also make you weak. And what do I mean by that? Like, I always say that there's a thread of commonality that you'll find in people and how they do things. Seldom will a person walk fast, eat fast, talk fast, and drive slow. Like, if they do things rambunctiously, that's how they do everything like that, right? So when you think about certain businesses, this may be a business that moves slow. It's got a long, slow cycle. Even the people that are involved are very like stable, because it's all about security and things of that nature. But then you come into social media where things are moving fast and they can't just turn on a dime and all of a sudden adapt to this medium that moves at a different speed. And so I can understand sometimes the apprehension and pushing a message that feels kind of like opposite, or against the current of how your industry moves. And so in some instances, I don't think that everybody needs to go the, hey, we're funny, look at us. But you still also on some level needs to learn how to acquiesce to the medium that you're on, and at the very least figure out in what ways can we bend. So a gentleman who wrote a really good book about this, and he actually updates the audio book pretty often. And even though he wrote it back in, I want to say 2012, 2013, a lot of the stuff that he talks about in it is still very relevant today in 2025, which was Gary Vaynerchuk, or Gary V as they call him. And the book was Crushing It, where he really talked about this. He talked about how leveraging social media, you think that, because to your point when you talked about the guy with the sign thing, he was saying like it's somewhere, it's a guy that's a mechanic that's selling tires right now, and they think that you hop on and you got to be talking about tires all day, and it's like, no, you could actually be talking about something else, but then building your following, and then when people need tires, they're thinking about you, right? And so it's like we have to learn that the way that we gain attention and the way that we develop trust is different from how we sell our actual product. And I think that that's really what it comes down to, is that we got to get away from trying to sell people, and we have to start building relationships. Building relationships is different from selling. And I think that the industry standard has always been, I find the person who needs the product, I find their pain point, I push the product, I overcome the objective, I close the sale, right? But nowadays, it's a little different, especially since things are on demand now. If I need tires, I already know how to get after the person. I really don't need you to come to me. So if you're going to somehow fight your way through this, constant onslaught of information that we're all dealing with, then you have to incentivize me to do that. And it's not going to be because you're talking about tires. It's going to be because you're doing something else, right? You're doing something else that makes me care about you as a person who just happens to sell tires. And now that I need some tires, I see you as a friend. Because see, that's how we actually see the people that we follow on social media. We feel like we know them. We don't
Right.
know them, but it feels like we do, right? And so if they're selling something that we need, I'm much more likely to buy from a friend than I am hopping on Google or whatever. No, man, so and so, I'm a trial her X, Y, and Z. And so I think that that's the new way in this new space, this new social media driven economy that we're in right now, of like how businesses have to position themselves. And it is difficult, but I think that the ones that have figured it out and the ones that have aligned themselves with people that know messaging, they're the ones that's thriving.
And they're saving or making millions of dollars. Okay, this is a
Yes.
good segue. Segment 2, the power up, building presence. We want to talk about building your brand and building your influence at work. So we were talking about corporate, like their messaging. They need to go from talking like a business and talking to individuals. And the ones that do it right either save millions or make millions, or probably obviously both. Now let's take it from the company lens to the individual person lens. When we're talking about relationships matter, how we build our network, that all matters as a company, right, to make money. So as a person, I imagine that I could extrapolate that down and say how I communicate and the networks I build within the company will also help me make money. Now, maybe I'm crazy here, but something tells me following those same principles can help an individual person. Being a little sarcastic because it obviously helps. Help me and others that are listening. What do you think some of the biggest mistakes are people make when they're trying to build their personal brand? I know that sometimes you feel like you can't bring your whole self to work. And maybe my boss is actually listening to my last podcast and actually broadcast it to my team, saying, because we have a monthly development session where we take an hour to go learn something. And they actually went and looked at my podcast episodes. So maybe he'll listen to this one. So if he does, Andrew, just ignore this part. But sometimes I don't know if I can bring my full self to work. And so the Brian that you will see here, and if I was on your couch, is probably not going to be the same Brian that I get to work. Now, I don't go to work and I'm, hi, everybody, I'm Brian Bell. But I tighten up. I'm not going to lie. I tighten up a little bit. Wrong or right, and we'll go through that. But what do you think the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to build their personal brand at work?
It's trying to find your authentic voice. As me and my wife, we just had a conversation about this. I probably shouldn't out her like this, but I'm gonna just go ahead and, because she's such an adorable or something, but she's crushing it in some areas at work, right? And she's the type that she'll think far ahead and then just create problems sometimes that doesn't exist. But anytime that she's doing these meetings and stuff, one of her strongest assets is her personality, right? And so she knows how to employ her personality when she's delivering content from like a meeting or any kind of presentation that she's doing. When she gets the feedback, okay, while it makes her feel good, she sometimes questions if she was being fake in that moment, right? And something, the code switching that we all sometimes
I
have to
think
do,
about this a lot. I totally understand
and
it.
so, if you feel that way, then it's still valid. And so, I let her get it out, but I told her, I was like, we all at times will pick and choose when we want to perform, right? Just because you're performing or just because you're playing up a certain, quality about yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you're being fake. You know what I mean? Like we are all multifaceted individuals. And so one, you got to acknowledge, give yourself permission to be able to show a side of yourself while recognizing that, maybe I don't show everybody everything because that may not be for them, right? Like you do have to at times understand that I think sometimes we get into this space, and this is a good segue because man, this is a very good segue because you got a lot of people that are actually getting in trouble at work because they're being too much of their authentic selves on social media and they don't recognize that this stuff comes with some blowback, right? And then when they do something on social media that goes viral, they feel like, well, my job shouldn't care because that's my personal world. And it's like, nah, but you are still a representation of this organization, and we don't want to deal with the negative blowback. And so
100%.
I think that because of that, many of us in this new space, we're trying to figure out like this middle ground between I want to be my authentic self, right? But then I also have to understand that I'm operating inside of this structure and that if we all show up as our authentic selves, we're no longer a team. Because a team means, yeah, you are your authentic self, but I need you, if you are the center on this team, I don't need you out at the 3-point line trying to shoot threes. I need you down low banging it. You know what I mean? Like that's your job is to block the perimeter. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't need you to be the running back that's trying to run downfield and catch, long bombs. It's like you may have that talent, you may have that skill set, but inside of this environment, I need you to do this thing because, one piece of this cog goes haywire and the machine doesn't work. And so I think that as we're evolving into this space, we have to sometimes balance that where we're giving our space an opportunity, we're giving ourselves an opportunity in the space to be authentic while still acknowledging that we are a part of a system and we're an important integral part of the system. And so we can't just go off and run and be rogue. I think that as it relates to the organization, it can become a little dicey because the organization needs to also understand that, yes, while they are a part of the system and they are doing this thing, they are also an individual, and you don't want to kill their individuality so much to where you're not even tapping into what their strongest resource is, right? Because they may have ideas, they may have insights, but if you beat that out of them because you just got them as this, like we talked about, this mechanical figure, then now all of a sudden you're missing the innovation, the ingenuity, the inventiveness that can come from people, when you have created an environment that does at the very least acknowledge people. And I'm gonna be honest, Brian, I think that that's really what it comes down to. Sometimes people would not care if you went against what it is that they thought you were supposed to do, meaning me as the employee. I have my suggestions and they are like, no, I want you to do it this way. People can accept that if at the very least they feel acknowledged. And I think that that's where a lot of times management drops the ball is in acknowledging that you are talking to a professional. You are talking to someone that has their thoughts. They have value. Why the hell did you hire them if your goal was not to get the best out of them, right? But getting the best out of them means that you have to give them space to, one, a little bit of autonomy to be able to make some decisions on their own, but two, at the very least, hear them out and have some kind of system that allows these ideas to sometimes go up the chain, not just, oh yeah, you said it, I hear you out, but now go ahead and do this. But every once in a while, pull an idea in. Like, let someone see that there's a reward on the opposite end of them sharing their value, right? And so, like I said, I think we're in this space nowadays where we are trying to find that balance between individuality and conformity, because a little bit of both is needed in order for, I think, successful organizations to thrive nowadays. If you're an individual, you do got to know, like, you do got a job, bro.
Yeah.
Like, don't be out here wilding out and thinking that just because because everybody's recording, everybody's watching, and sometimes that little moment, that bad moment that you have, could cost you. And so we do have to be sensitive to the point that we're flying real close to the ground now, man, and
There's a
any kind of mistake could.
Yeah, there's a magical balance because I'll say when I first started this is month 4 now, month 5 even maybe. I still am a little bit nervous about it. I have a corporate job. But before I hit record, I was like, well, you asked me how real can we be? I'm like as real as possible. But I also have a corporate job, and so I'm like, and I need that job. And I got 3 kids and a mortgage, right?
Right,
Uh,
right.
but I also feel like for anybody that's also listening or watching this, where there's this world where you do need to step out a little bit and it's okay to be yourself. Now, there is an absolute balance. And so, to your point of mistakes people make, is people just, I'm going to smoke this blunt on camera and then go to work the next day and then wonder why I got drug tested, right? Like,
John Moran can't stop throwing guns at stuff. He did it the other day. That's like, bro,
got a $75,000
are
fine.
you,
And it's like, we
are you
have to
trying to
use,
lose your job?
he wants to get fired. And so there's a balance where it's like you use some brain cells. But what I would also want to say is I've made more connections. I feel
Mm,
like I've learned so much by putting myself out there, talking to people like you to learn about how to be better at my job. And so you have to put yourself out there. One, this is about getting promotion. This is about getting recognized. This is about getting more pay. This is about getting the job you want. If you're not in it, you have to put yourself out there, but just make sure you put some parameters on it, because we don't need, like you said, the John Morant's. To your point, though, it's um, be yourself, but read the room as
yeah,
you're
read
being
the room.
yourself and put those parameters in there. And to my next question, I used to always have this feeling where I had this amazing question when I was in class, just wherever, right? Where I would want to raise my hand and ask something, but I was too scared. And then the weirdo kid next to me asked it. And then they got the brownie points because they asked the question. And I was like, that was my question, but they had the
Good.
chutzpah to say it, right? And my question for you really is, okay, so you personally, you have a gift for owning the room. It's just natural. Mike, no Mike, you talked about you were doing things out the mic when you did your first show. For people that don't feel as comfortable, for the introverts listening, how do we build our presence?
Mm.
How do we network when we're not the loudest voice or when we feel uncomfortable about speaking up?
So that's a good question. And just even for clarity, I'm what they would call. I think I heard a new term, which was ambivert, which is basically like an introverted extrovert. I actually tap into both sides, and it kind of depends on what environment I'm in. Because to be clear, I do not feel the need to speak in all environments, and there are many cases where I've had to learn how to get comfortable in my silence and not feel awkward, right? Because there are times where you almost feel compelled. You feel like you have to say something. You feel like you should be saying something, and so one of the areas that I've even grown at in this space is recognizing that one, silence can be a tool, right?
Mm.
Because first off, everybody loves a person that can listen. Now, there's a difference between being silent and just being quiet. Sometimes you could be silent, but you're listening to someone. You're actively listening. You're actually rather engaged. You're actually receiving a lot more about what that person is saying than the other people that are just waiting for their time to talk. So in most cases, anytime I find myself in those environments, one, I do not give myself unnecessary pressure to feel like I have to say something, right? I am attempting to add value. I think this is one of those things where quality is better than quantity, seeking to add value as opposed to just wanting to be heard. Because you get that a lot of times, especially in like Zoom meetings where you just kind of want to jump in and you say the little corporate speak thing that they do because you just really wanted your supervisor to know, yeah, I was here.
I
But
pay attention. I care. Yeah.
yeah, when it comes to that, I don't really like that because one, it's exhausting, and two, it's not doing the thing that you think it's doing. It's not going to really put you in a better position. Like brown nosing is not really going to put you in the position to actually get the increase that you think it is. It's really more like a knee jerk, socially awkward reaction that people would do. What I do in these meetings is I'm trying to define what's the one thing that's not being said, right? I search for the area and what I mean by that is not just, ooh, so I can trigger you, or what's the thing to shock you, but no, what's the piece that everybody's missing? And you can only get that when you're actually listening to someone, right? So if you are an introvert, you're probably already the type that's taking stuff in. So that means that you're thinking of things that has not been said yet in this meeting. Now, the next stage, this can come with a little bit of anxiety because you do almost have to force yourself to do it. But when you find that thing that's not being said, or you have that point that you think will add value and you introduce it, oftentimes you'll notice that that's when the conversation shifts, right? Because you just introduced a different idea. that has value. And now you damn near ain't got to say nothing else for the rest of the meeting, because now they're like, man, and just like Brian said earlier, then all of a sudden everybody's doubling back to what Brian said, but it was because Brian chose to add something new to the discourse that had not already been said, as opposed to, yeah, I just want to double back and, like all the corporate speak terms that just become so annoying that people will say. How many times have we been on Zoom meetings where we're like, this could have been an email, right? Or we were
1,000
here
million
for an
times.
hour and a half and they could have gotten this done in 15, 20 minutes, but the majority of it was everybody just wanting to be heard.
A
Again, I told you, I don't
performative
like
art.
giving bios. I don't like that either, right? So if everybody's saying what needs to be said in that moment, I don't feel pressure just to speak up, just to speak up. I only add value when I think I have something of value to say. And I'm telling you what that ends up doing is that it will get you to a space where people start to look forward to when you're going to say something in these meetings. Even if it is few and far in between, make it to where is when you do say something, it has impact, because now your words carry greater weight, as opposed to you're the person that's just nervously speaking. And yeah, you might be seeing to it that there's no dead space on the Zoom call, but what value did you really add to it? So I think that that's really what it comes down to, is like really searching for the moments of where you can have impact. Sometimes you do got to kind of force yourself to do it, but in those moments when you do it, they are oftentimes rewarded. And I think that that's how you start to pull yourself out of it, because then now you're developing an association. Every time that you say something, it's like Pavlov's dog. I did that and I got rewarded for it. Okay, that wasn't that bad. I didn't have to keep talking throughout the entire meeting, but they felt me. They felt I was here. So if they asking you a question, be ready to answer it. But yeah, that nervous knee jerk, I gotta compete with Brad from accounting who is trying to get a promotion. Now, anybody got time for that? You know what I'm saying? And it's not effective.
My takeaway is, please actually listen in these meetings, even if it feels like a boring topic, and pay attention to what's not being said but needs to be said. And that's when you speak up. Think through what is actually going to add value versus just saying, oh, I was going to say that, or just the knee-jerk reaction to what you're saying. Is be the person that adds value in the conversation, even if it's once throughout this entire 30 or 45 or 60-minute meeting. Wait until there's some actual value and make sure you're watching out for what is being missed, because there's probably other people that are wishing that they said it too, but you be that person, and that's where you bring value versus just speaking up.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to skip a whole entire segment because we're already coming up at an hour, which is insane. I could talk to you now for 2, 3, 4 more hours. So I have to skip a whole segment. There's some good questions there, but we'll have to double back. All right, let's talk through our next segment, which is called Game Day Rituals. How do
Mm,
you stay sharp? You look
mm,
fit. You look in shape. I am lazy. I try to work out. I do like a 10-minute YouTube exercise with this super swole dude, so it makes me feel good about myself.
uh,
I take supplements and all the vitamins and all that stuff to help me feel better. So whatever. I try that way, but I need to do, more physical stuff. But anyway, enough about me. What about you? What are your daily or weekly rituals? What do you do to stay grounded? What do you do to
mm.
stay creative? What do you do to stay effective?
That's a great question. I appreciate the compliment, man. I've fallen off from my gym regimen. I actually might get back on it, if not today, tomorrow. But nonetheless,
I'm gonna
because
do it
I was
tomorrow.
pretty
Tomorrow
disciplined.
for me too.
I was pretty disciplined before, but in terms of like what it is that I do, everything with me has always been centered around like my relationships. And right now, like I'm in a very fortunate space. I call myself the Warren Buffett of relationships. Me and Warren Buffett have the same birthday. And so we kind of share some similarities beyond the, hundreds of billions of dollars.
So let me hold a couple bucks then, bro.
Right. Beyond that, right. That was I'm the Warren Buffett of relationships, right? And just largely in the sense that I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of great relationships that add value. And so, you'd be surprised how kind of therapeutic that can be, how therapeutic a good conversation can be, right? Me and my wife, we have great exchanges. And so I think because of that, that keeps me very centered, because one, the exchange, that intimate exchange from just me, literally had a 3-hour conversation with a good friend of mine yesterday, and that conversation went all over the place. But when I got off the phone, I felt so much energy and so many new ideas that, honest to God, it wasn't even what she was saying to me. it was what I was hearing myself say to her, right? So sometimes, like, so much comes through relationships. There's so much value that comes through relationships that I think that we at times can take that for granted, you know? And so I think that that's core for me in terms of keeping me grounded, keeping me centered.
Public speaking is still your thing. You said you're a, was it an ambivert? Introvert,
Right.
extrovert, introvert. Okay. Are there any specific techniques that can make me a better speaker? Is there something I can do in the moment to, I know, a lot of people are just nervous when it comes to talking in front of other people. Is there something I can do to be better?
One of the things that I sometimes have to do is remember that it's okay to slow down. I think that because we know that there's a lot of things that we want to say, that's what can get us a little nervous. That's when we start to say a lot and we start to do a lot of those devices. It's when your lips are moving faster than your mind is. Oftentimes what we'll realize is that when you slow down, you actually speed up. And because I'm someone that can be excitable, because I'm someone that really enjoys engaging, I have to remember to pull things back at times, because when you pull things back, it gives you an opportunity to center yourself. You can take a deep breath, and it's okay to feel nerves. I think that that's the thing that a lot of people mistake, is that they think just because you're nervous in these environments, just because your heart is beating fast, that there's something that's unnatural about that,
And you're not good at it when
and that you're not good
everybody
at it.
gets nervous and their heart beats, no matter if they look natural
Everybody.
or not.
The only difference is that some people learn to love that thing, right? And part of what I tell people is, you know, it's all about association. You think about things that you do that you find incredibly exciting. Let's say some people like to go to uh roller coasters. They like roller coasters at amusement parks. You will literally stand in line for an hour and some change for a thrilling 2.5 minute ride that is
If
going
that.
to literally scare you shitless, right? It's nervous. That feeling feels very much like the nerves you get prior to speaking in front of people. But the difference is we call one thing exciting and we call another thing terrifying. When in reality, it's the exact same internal thing that's happening, but in one area, well, I want to do this thing that makes me feel excited, that makes my heart and my adrenaline pump. But over here, it's like, no, that's horrifying. And it's like sometimes if you can play with your associations in your mind and say, okay, are you horrified or are you really excited? Because they both actually feel the same, right? And if you can sometimes change, like there are certain devices you can do to just play with the way that you are perceiving whatever it is that you're experiencing. Because to be clear, you don't have to do these things in many cases, right? You chose to get that promotion. You want that promotion. Like, this is actually something that you want. You just don't want to mess up. I get it. None of us want to F up. But when you're feeling the nerves, the goal is okay, can I use this, right? Can I use this to make me more alert in this moment? Because I'm telling you, there's nothing that feels better than when you're on the other side of it and you realize that you actually did a pretty good job at it, or it it wasn't as bad as you thought it was going to be, because the anxiety always feels worse than the actual experience of it itself. And every time Usher goes out on stage, he feels nerves. Every time Beyonce, before she performs, she feels nerves. So if Beyonce feels nerves, what do you think you're supposed to feel? Like, you think you better than Beyonce? You ain't better than Beyonce, you know? So if you can at least accept that what you're experiencing is natural, then you at least look at it differently, right? Like, this isn't, my nerves aren't an unnatural thing. Everybody feels this. So now I can at least get centered and say, oh, and the people know I'm nervous, you know, and we're all just performing. We're pretending like we're not nervous, but you're nervous a little bit. You know what I mean? Because if you're not nervous, it means you don't care about it. And you never want to perform and not be a little nervous, because that means that you're probably about to do a subpar job, because you don't care enough about this thing. That means you're not reaching high enough.
That's a good call. Okay. I love that. If you're not nervous, you're not reaching high enough. Okay, we're gonna end on this. The final segment. That's bars right there, by the way. I like that. All right. Final segment called the 2 minute drill. Just quick
Mm,
fire, rapid fire questions, question and answers, and then I will send you on your merry way. What is one book every person, every professional should read? I think you said
man.
one earlier, but I don't know if it's a different one. You said
Yeah, no, it's a different one. Because this is the one that got me into my workout regimen. And I've read a lot of great books, but this one really surprised me. Atomic
Atomic
Habits.
Habits.
Yeah, it's so basically the essence of this book is basically about how change happens incrementally. And he breaks down the science of how to accomplish great things. I think oftentimes when we go to accomplish some objective, we always know what the end result is. And because it can feel daunting, we don't know how to actually change. But what he basically gets you to see is that change isn't this, change is actually this, right? But over a period of time, like if you just change a little bit over a period of time, this is what ends up happening, right? And so starting something that's very small can end up having dramatic results on the back end. And so he talks about if you want to work out. He said if you want to work out, start it at the smallest thing that you can do to change. It might just be you getting up and putting on your shoes every morning and then taking them off. Only commit to that. Don't commit to anything else other than getting up and lacing up your shoes and then taking them off. Just commit to that. And it's so fascinating to see how it's not about getting up and then buying a gym membership and saying, I'm going to work out for 20 minutes every day. No, commit to the smallest, most incremental thing that you can do that leads you to that, and just commit to that. Because you're not going to just get up and put up your shoes every day and just take them off. That feels ridiculous.
I've already put my shoes on. Might as well do something now.
Let me at least walk around the block. All right. All right. So now for the next week, maybe you just walking around the block. Okay. That's a new habit you just
And
formed.
then a dog chases you, and now you're running.
Right, right. So no, that book, man, that book was phenomenal to me, man.
Atomic
And
Habits.
Atomic
All right.
Habits.
I'm going to pick that up. One brand that gets it right. We talked about Wendy's. Is there another brand that gets it right, or do you want to stick with Wendy's that gets it right? And why do they get it right?
So one brand that gets it right. Okay, so I'm gonna go to another one beyond Wendy's, and it's a woman by the name of Tabitha Brown. Tabitha Brown gets it right, and she is content creator. She's an influencer. She's almost like a Martha Stewart in training. I think Tabitha Brown is fantastic, and largely because she embodies everything that I was just talking about earlier, which was someone that figured out how to take her personal brand and her personal messaging and translate that over to success in her products. Because she sells multiple things. She's got cookbooks, she sells spices, and I think even recently she's braided into some other things. But when you look at her social media persona, it's been built around her authenticity. When you think about her, you actually don't think about her product. So a lot of people were following her because they just loved her energy. And so then when they started recognizing that, oh, she also sells these products, now because I feel loyal to you and you as a person, I now want to support your brand. And I mean, she's in Target. She's like her brands are doing very successful. And because people want to see her, because people want to hear the things that she has to say, it's basically like free promo for her. She's got millions of followers on Instagram. And to me, she is almost at the forefront of this new business model that shows how you can engage a following and get them to be staunch supporters of whatever you.
All right. What's one phrase or mindset you live by while you're working?
All right, this might be more universal, but I guess it does also apply to the business stuff. And again, this one is biblical. Never cast your pearls amongst the swine, right? Which is ultimately, to me, just means to never give something of value to someone or something that's not going to appreciate it. And I think that we all have to do that at times, that we all find ourselves getting into these spaces where you know what your worth is, you know what your value is. If you are in a space where that is not being appreciated, then you need to be looking for your exit strategy, because life is too precious and time is that one commodity that we do not get back. And so to be somewhere or to be aligned with someone that is not appreciating the value that you add, that's just not the thing that I do. I work too hard. I work too hard and I give too much value to be in a space where at the very least you don't acknowledge the value. And see, that's also, I think, a message that corporations can learn from a management perspective. People leave you guys not because of the money. They leave you because they don't feel acknowledged. They don't feel seen. They don't feel appreciated by the very organization that's employing them. So they'll go work for somewhere else where they're getting paid less, but they feel like they're making more of a contribution. They feel like they're being seen. I'm telling you, people do not understand how powerful it is to purely just acknowledge someone. We are in this day and age, man, where people go out of their way to pretend like you do not exist. And so when I find myself in a situation that's like that, yeah, I know it's not for me.
Okay. Two more questions. What's the best way to pitch yourself in one sentence?
Being authentic, being
Yourself.
authentic.
Be
You
authentic.
can never
Okay.
go wrong with that.
Last question. Name of the podcast is the Level Up Podcast. What is one thing somebody should stop doing immediately if they want to level up?
I'm gonna say stay out of the comment section. Stay out of that comment section, man. You know, it is, yeah. It's you got to be careful. You got to be careful with social media nowadays, man, because it's while it does have a lot of great value, it can also be a drain on resources. And I think that we're in a day and age right now where we are being manipulated and we don't realize it. And we're being manipulated by the algorithm, right? The algorithm is getting us to the point where we are no longer thinking critically, and it's because its goal is to keep you on the platform, right? And so, there are a lot of people, man, that live in these echo chambers and they don't even realize it, and sometimes that could be limiting your growth, so
Also,
you got to be
I
careful.
would say at this point, probably half of the comments are probably bots or somebody in Lithuania or something with 1,000 cell phones in front of them making posts just to
Great
trigger the
point.
Americans. And so you're probably not talking to a real person anyway.
Great point.
Probably not.
Great point.
You're probably not.
Great point. You out here
Very
getting
good.
outraged by somebody that don't even speak the language. He don't know nothing about what's
Don't
happening.
even care. Don't know. Just
Yeah. So stay out
we're
of the
just getting
comment section.
triggered left and right. I said that was the last question. Actually, the final question is, if I want to find the Tequila Tales, if I want to connect with you, if I need help with branding or marketing, can you plug what you're doing? How do I find you? What
Absolutely.
more?
So the best way to reach out to me is obviously through all channels. I'm on LinkedIn as just Isaac Paul Austin, but the Tequila Tales is on all platforms. But it is the Tequila entails. So that's whether that's the website, whether that's social media, and we're on all platforms. It's rather easy to find us. And then my personal brand, which is just Isaac Paul. This is Isaac Paul on Instagram. And yeah, just drop me a message. I'm always available. There's a lot of consulting work that I'll do with independent brands. I primarily work with like small and medium businesses, but there have been a few larger ones that'll bring me in because one of the largest things that happens sometimes with the organizations, and this is actually a lot of the work I did with BMW, is the breakdown in communication that happens between departments sometimes where they're trying to achieve an objective. And there's always this assumption that each department knows what the other one is doing and that they should know what it is that you need. And that's one of the major things that you always end up learning is that we're
Message
all
in
assuming.
relationships.
Yeah, we are assuming that people know what your problem is. We're assuming that people understand what it is that you're going through. And sometimes what you need is a bridge. You need someone that can kind of sit in the middle and not just mediate, but that can actually listen and help you all to kind of decipher whatever those issues are. And so this is something that I've done for organizations for the past couple of years. And they see value in it because it's not just workshops. It really is like an active conversation and a discussion and a structured discussion that we do that kind of gets them in better alignment. And so, yeah, anyone that's interested in those services, you can hit me up on either one of the platforms. The message will get to me.
Beautiful. All right, Isaac, this was fire. This was fun. Thank you. I'm doing this honestly, selfishly, because I want to learn, and I'm hoping that other people are the same. So there's a lot of wisdom here. You're telling your story. It was real. I appreciate that. That was super helpful. To everyone listening, if you're trying to show up strong at work, if you're trying to build your voice, you're trying to stop feeling invisible in meetings, and you want to make sure that you actually show some impact, this is that episode is the roadmap. So make sure you're listening to it and share it with your friends. Please make sure you hit like, follow, subscribe, hit those buttons so make sure you don't miss another episode. And also check us out at MambaHR.com. We're building the HR business partner in your pocket, more tools to help you win at work. We'll talk more about that in another episode. So once again, I'm Brian Bell, co-founder of MambaHR. This is the Level Up Career Playbook, and I will see you all next week. Thank you so much and have a great one.